The Great Hall of the Galactic Senate stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Floating platforms held delegates from 47 different species, each one representing billions of lives across thousands of worlds. Light filtered down from crystal ceilings that showed the stars beyond, a reminder that this place existed at the very center of known civilization. Ambassador of the Collective settled his forearms against the railing of his platform and watched the human delegation enter through the main doors far below. They looked so small from up here, so fragile. Their soft skin and thin bones made them appear almost childlike compared to the armored or the massive. Yet here they were, requesting full membership in the galactic community. It was a routine matter, really. Humanity had passed all the basic requirements. They had achieved faster-than-light travel. They had not destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons, though they had come close several times. They had made peaceful first contact with the traders 3 years ago and had behaved reasonably well in all their dealings since then. Today was simply the psychological assessment. Every species underwent this process before joining the Senate. It helped the other members understand how the new species thought, what they valued, what they feared. The information was useful for trade negotiations and diplomatic relations, nothing more. High Arbiter, an ancient being made of crystalline structures that caught the light like diamonds, called the session to order. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into 47 different languages by the Neuralink systems embedded in every platform. "We are gathered to complete the integration assessment of the species known as humanity," announced. "As is customary, we have requested a randomly selected citizen rather than a trained diplomat. This ensures we observe the true nature of the species rather than a prepared presentation." Senator Al, a creature with 16 tentacles and eyes that seemed to look in all directions at once, floated forward on his platform. He was the chair of the Psychology Committee and had performed these assessments for over 300 years. He had seen every type of mind the galaxy had to offer, or so he believed. "Bring forward the witness," Al said. The human who walked to the central platform was a female of middle years. Her hair was dark with streaks of gray, and she wore simple clothing that looked comfortable rather than impressive. Her name, according to the records, was Maria Santos. She worked as a teacher of young humans in a place called Brazil. She had been selected entirely at random from Earth's population of 8 billion. Maria looked around at the massive chamber with wide eyes, could see her hands trembling slightly. This was normal. Most witnesses were overwhelmed by the Senate at first. "Please state your name for the record," Al said. "Maria Santos. And you understand that you have been chosen to represent your species in this assessment." "Yes, though I'm not sure why you picked me. I'm nobody special." "That is precisely why we picked you," Al replied. "We wish to understand ordinary humans, not extraordinary ones. Please answer our questions honestly. There are no wrong answers." The first hour of questioning was deeply boring. Found himself checking reports on his personal display while Al asked Maria about human social structures, economic systems, and political organizations. Her answers were straightforward and matched what the Senate already knew about humanity. They lived in family groups. They formed larger communities called nations. They competed for resources but also cooperated in times of crisis. Standard behavior for a social species. Other delegates seemed equally uninterested. The representative had entered a light hibernation state. Two of them were having a quiet conversation about trade routes. Even Al seemed to be going through the motions, asking questions from a standard list he had used hundreds of times before. Then he reached the section on reproduction and child-rearing. "How many offspring have you produced?" Al asked. "I have one daughter," Maria said. She is 23 years old now." "Only one. Is this typical for your species?" "It varies. Some humans have many children, some have none. I always wanted more, but life did not work out that way." Tell us about your relationship with this offspring. Maria's face changed. Something soft entered her eyes that had not seen before. Is everything to me, she said simply. She is my heart walking around outside my body. Several delegates looked up from their distractions. That was an unusual phrase. Al leaned forward slightly. Could you explain what you mean by that? I mean that I love her more than I love myself, more than I love anything. When she was born, I looked at her face and something changed inside me forever. I knew that I would do anything to keep her safe and help her grow. The representative woke from hibernation. Its compound eyes focused on the small human below. Anything? Al asked. That seems like an exaggeration. It is not an exaggeration. When was 3 years old, she became very sick, a fever that would not break. The doctors did not know what was wrong. I stayed awake by her bed for 3 days and 3 nights. I did not eat. I did not sleep. I held her hand and talked to her and begged whatever gods might exist to let her live. You damaged your own biological function for an offspring. The representative spoke for the first time. That seems inefficient. If you died from exhaustion, who would care for the child? Maria looked up at the massive armored creature without fear. I was not thinking about efficiency. I was thinking about my daughter. Nothing else existed in the universe except her fever and her small hand in mine. The chamber had gone quiet. Delegates who had been ignoring the proceedings were now paying attention. Al checked his instruments. The Neuralink translators were functioning normally. The thought readers were registering unusual patterns from the human witness, emotional signatures that did not match any species in the database. Perhaps the translators are malfunctioning, suggested the delegate, a being of pure mathematics given physical form. No rational species would compromise its own survival for a single offspring. The mathematical logic does not support such behavior. The translators are fine, Al said, checking again. She means exactly what she is saying. I do not understand, the delegate continued. How many offspring did you say your species typically produces? It varies, but the average is between 1 and 3 children per parent, Maria answered. And you invest this level of resources into each one, this level of emotional commitment, even though they might die anyway, even though the survival of your genetic line would be better served by having many offspring and investing less in each. Maria smiled, but there was something fierce in it. We do not have children to continue our genetic line. We have children because we want to love them. The loving is the point. High Arbiter raised one crystalline arm. I am calling a brief recess. The psychology committee needs to confer. The platforms began to move as delegates gathered in small groups. Noticed that the usual chatter of a recess was missing. Instead, there were quiet, intense conversations. The delegation had pulled their platform away from the others entirely and seemed to be arguing among themselves. Looked down at Maria Santos, who was standing alone on the central platform. She did not seem concerned about the disruption she had caused. She was looking at a small device in her hand, what humans called a phone. Her face wore the same soft expression as before. He wondered what she was looking at. A picture, perhaps, of the daughter she loved more than her own survival. Something uncomfortable stirred in his chest. He had served the Senate for 200 years. He had 3 reproductive partners and 17 offspring. He had never once considered staying awake for 3 days to watch over any of them. He had never once thought of any of them as his heart walking outside his body. He had always considered himself a good parent by standards. Now he was not sure what that meant anymore. The recess lasted for 6 hours instead of the scheduled 30 minutes. Spent most of that time reviewing records from Earth that the advanced research teams had collected. He was not the only one. All across the chamber, delegates were doing the same thing, pulling up every piece of data about human parental behavior they could find. The more he read, the more confused he became. Human parents routinely gave up their own food so their children could eat. This happened even in wealthy families where there was no shortage of food. Parents would claim they were not hungry simply so their children could have larger portions. Some did this every day for years without ever mentioning it. Human parents worked themselves to exhaustion to provide advantages for their offspring. They took extra jobs. They gave up their own dreams. One record showed a human father who had worked 18-hour days for 20 years so his daughter could attend a prestigious educational institution. When asked about this sacrifice, he had seemed confused by the question. "That's what parents do," he had said. Human parents placed themselves between their children and danger without any calculation of survival odds. There were thousands of recorded instances of parents throwing themselves in front of vehicles, fighting off predators with their bare hands, entering burning buildings. Many of these parents died. They did it anyway. The delegation sent an official query to the research database. Was there any evidence of humans calculating the cost-benefit ratio of these sacrifices? The answer came back negative. Humans did not seem to think about their children in terms of investment and return. They simply loved them with an intensity that all rational analysis. Al called the session back to order, but the usual formality was gone. Delegates were leaning forward on their platforms, focused on the small human woman below with an intensity usually reserved for declarations of war. "Let us continue," Al said. His voice was not as steady as before. "Maria Santos, we have some follow-up questions about your parental behavior." "Of course. The incident you described, where you stayed awake for 3 days during your daughter's illness. Did you experience any resentment toward the child for requiring this sacrifice?" Maria looked genuinely confused. "Resentment? No, why would I resent her? She was sick, she needed me." "But she was causing you harm. Sleep deprivation has serious effects on human biology. She was, in effect, damaging you." "She was not damaging me. She was not doing anything to me. She was sick. I was helping her. These are not the same things." The delegate spoke up. Its species was known for a practical approach to reproduction. They laid thousands of eggs and consumed the weaker offspring to provide nutrients for the stronger ones. It was efficient. It was logical. It ensured that only the best genetic material survived. "When your resources are limited," they asked, "do humans ever consume their weaker offspring to ensure the survival of the stronger ones?" The chamber fell completely silent. Maria stared at them for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was cold. "No, we do not eat our children. Even if they are sick, even if they are unlikely to survive anyway, even if their death would provide resources for healthier offspring. No, never. The idea is monstrous to us. But it is logical. The mathematics clearly support." "There is no mathematics for this," Maria interrupted. Her small voice somehow filled the entire chamber. "My daughter is not a number, she is not a calculation. She is my child. I would burn the entire galaxy to ashes before I would harm a hair on her head. I would tear down this Senate stone by stone. I would fight every one of you, all 47 species, with my bare hands, and I would lose, and I would die, and I would do it gladly if it meant keeping her safe for one more day." The thought readers went wild. Emotional signatures spiked across the entire chamber. Delegates from species that had never experienced anything like this were suddenly feeling echoes of it through the neural link systems. The delegate actually retreated backward, even though Maria Santos was a small, unarmed human standing alone at the center of the room. "You would die," they repeated slowly, "for a single offspring that you cannot guarantee will survive anyway. I would die for her without hesitation. I would die for her happily. I would consider it the finest thing I ever did. And this is normal for humans." Maria smiled again, that fierce and tender smile. "This is what it means to be a parent. This is what it means to love a child. Yes, this is completely normal for us." High Arbiter called another recess. This time, it lasted for 3 days. The investigation teams spread across Earth like a flood. High Arbiter had ordered a full study. The Maria Santos testimony had to be an anomaly. Surely no entire species could function with this level of irrational emotional investment in their offspring. Evolution would not permit it. The mathematics did not support it. There had to be a more sensible explanation. Was assigned to oversee the Eastern European research team. He traveled to a cold, gray city called Moscow and observed human families in their natural habitat. He watched parents bundle their children in thick clothing against the cold. He watched them hold small hands as they crossed streets. He watched them read stories at bedtime and check for monsters in closets, even though monsters clearly did not exist. He watched a father working in a factory for 12 hours a day. The man was exhausted. His back was damaged from years of labor. When asked him why he continued working so hard, the man showed him a photograph of 3 children. "So they can have a better life than I did," the man said. "So they never have to work in a factory. So they can be doctors or teachers or whatever they want to be." "But you will never benefit from their success," pointed out. "You will be dead or too old to enjoy it." The man looked at him with confusion. "I will benefit every day. I will benefit from seeing them happy. I will benefit from knowing they are safe. That is all the benefit I need." The research teams returned to the Senate with their reports. Every team had found the same thing. Every culture, every region, every economic class. Human parents loved their children with an intensity that all rational analysis. The reports contained thousands of individual cases. A mother in China who worked 3 jobs to save money for her son's education. A father in Nigeria who walked 20 miles each way to find medicine for his sick daughter. A couple in Germany who gave up their dream home to pay for their child's medical treatment. Parents in every country who went hungry so their children could eat. Parents who gave up sleep so their children could be comforted. Parents who sacrificed their own dreams, their own health, their own futures, all for children who might never fully appreciate what had been given. And here was the most disturbing part. The children often grew up and moved away. They started their own families. They visited their parents a few times a year if the parents were lucky. They did not repay the investment. There was no return on the sacrifice. When the research teams asked human parents about this, the parents seemed confused by the question. "I did not raise her so she would take care of me when I am old," one mother said. "I raised her so she could go out into the world and be happy. That is the whole point." "I got to watch him become who he is," one father said. "That is not a transaction. That is the whole point." The phrase kept appearing in report after report. That is the whole point. Human parents did not view their children as investments. They did not expect repayment. They did not calculate returns. They simply loved their children with everything they had, and watching those children grow and thrive was enough. It was everything. The delegation suffered a collective philosophical crisis. They had spent 10,000 years building their entire civilization on mathematical logic. Now they were confronted with beings who operated on a completely different system, and that system seemed to work. The delegation locked themselves in their embassy and refused all communication. Later, it was discovered that they had been having a species-wide discussion about the nature of their own reproductive practices. For the first time in their history, some were asking if there might be another way. The representative requested a private meeting with. "I do not understand," the massive creature said. Its armor plates clinked together as it moved. "Our species abandoned emotional attachment to offspring millions of years ago. It was inefficient. It caused too much pain when offspring died. We evolved past it." "And yet humans still have it," said. "Yes, and they are clearly less evolved than we are, less physically capable, less technologically advanced, and yet they have spread across their entire planet and survived every disaster. They have wars and plagues and natural catastrophes, and still they multiply. Still they thrive. What are you saying? There was silence for a long moment. I am saying that perhaps we evolved past the wrong thing. Perhaps what we thought was weakness is actually strength. Perhaps this irrational love they feel for their offspring is what makes them so hard to destroy. Had no answer for that. He was still thinking about the Russian factory worker and his 3 children. He was still thinking about Maria Santos and her fierce smile. He was starting to wonder if everything he knew about the universe was wrong. The full Senate reconvened 30 rotations after Maria Santos first took the witness stand. The Great Hall was quieter than anyone had ever heard it. Delegates sat on their floating platforms in silence, waiting for High Arbiter to speak. The crystalline being stood at the center of the chamber, where Maria Santos had stood 30 days before. His facets caught the starlight filtering down from the ceiling and scattered it into rainbows across the floor. This body has reviewed the research findings, said. We have confirmed that the testimony of Maria Santos was not an anomaly. Human parental behavior is consistent across their entire species. They all love their children with an intensity that our systems cannot measure or explain. He paused, the silence stretched out. The Psychology Committee has requested one final piece of testimony before we proceed to the vote on human membership. A murmur ran through the chamber. What more was there to learn? What more could there possibly be? The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and a small figure walked in. It was a human child, a boy of perhaps 7 years. He had brown hair and large eyes that looked around the massive chamber with curiosity rather than fear. Behind him in the observation gallery sat a human woman who looked very much like him, his mother. Senator Al floated forward on his platform. State your name for the record. James, the boy said, James Cooper. And do you understand where you are? You're aliens. This is your big meeting place. Mom explained it to me. Good, we have some questions for you. James nodded. He did not seem nervous. He was examining the nearest delegate, a silicon-based life form that glittered like a living gemstone. You're pretty, he told it. The delegate had no response for this. Al continued. James, we want to ask you about your mother, the woman in the gallery behind you. James turned and waved at his mother. She waved back, smiling. What do you want to know? What do you believe your mother would do if you were in danger? James thought about this for a moment. His face scrunched up in concentration, a deeply human expression that somehow made the entire Senate lean forward. Anything, he said finally. Could you elaborate on that? She would fight a monster, James said. She would fight 100 monsters. She would fight you. He pointed at the delegate, 12 feet of armored carapace and blade limbs. She would lose, probably, but she would still fight, and she wouldn't even be scared because being scared of stuff stops when it's about me. The chamber was absolutely silent. How do you know this? Al asked quietly. Because she's my mom. That's what moms do. That's what dads do too. They love you so much that nothing else matters. Even if they're scared of everything else in the whole universe, they're not scared when it's about keeping you safe. James said this with complete certainty. Not hope, not faith, knowledge. He knew his mother would fight a 12-foot armored alien for him. He knew it the way he knew that the sun would rise tomorrow. In the gallery, James's mother was watching with that same soft, fierce expression that Maria Santos had worn. The thought readers registered the emotional signature again, that impossible wavelength that no other species in the galaxy could match. Thank you, James, Al said. His voice was unsteady. You may return to your mother. James walked back across the chamber floor. His mother came down from the gallery to meet him, and she took his hand, and she looked up at the assembled representatives of 47 species, as if she was ready to fight every single one of them right now. She probably was. High Arbiter stepped forward. I must address this body. The delegates waited. I have served the Galactic Senate for 9,000 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have witnessed wars that burned across entire star systems and peace treaties that united ancient enemies. I have experienced more than any being should experience in one lifetime. He paused, his crystalline form catching the light. In all that time, I have never encountered anything like this. This love that humans feel for their children. This willingness to sacrifice everything, to fight anything, to die gladly for beings who may never fully understand what was given for them. The delegates remained silent. Many of them had experienced the same confusion, the same disorientation over the past 30 days. We created this institution to achieve understanding between species, continued. We believed that if we could understand how other beings thought and felt, we could work together for the good of all. We believed that all minds, however different, operated on principles we could eventually learn and catalog. He looked at James Cooper, who was now sitting in his mother's lap in the observation gallery. We were wrong. A ripple of surprise went through the chamber. What do you mean? Asked the delegate. I mean that we have encountered a limit. Humans have access to something we do not possess, something we cannot study into existence, something we cannot legislate or vote ourselves into having. They love their children in a way that breaks all our models and defies all our mathematics. Turn to face the full assembly. I move for permanent dissolution of this body. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted questions and objections. The noise was tremendous. Order called, I will explain. Slowly the chaos subsided. To continue this Senate would be to pretend that we are qualified to govern a galaxy that contains this level of love. We are not qualified. We have spent 200,000 years believing we understood the parameters of bond and sacrifice. We built our entire civilization on that understanding. And now we have discovered that we were playing in the shallows while humans were swimming in the depths of an ocean we never knew existed. He gestured toward the small boy and his mother in the gallery. Look at them. Look at what they have. And then tell me honestly that we have any right to judge them, to assess them, to decide whether they are worthy of joining our community. We should be asking them if we are worthy of joining theirs. The vote was called. It was unanimous. The Galactic Senate voted itself out of existence. As the delegates began to file out of the Great Hall, made his way to the observation gallery. James and his mother were still there, watching the exodus with confused expressions. What happened? The mother asked. Did we fail the assessment? No, said we did. He looked at James, who was playing with a loose thread on his shirt, completely unconcerned with the fact that he had just ended 200,000 years of galactic governance. Your species will not be granted membership, said. The mother's face fell. The Senate no longer exists to grant it, he clarified. But I suspect you will do fine without us. Better than fine. You will do what you have always done. You will love your children impossibly, irrationally, cosmically, and the galaxy will simply have to make room. He paused, looking at the small human boy who had such absolute faith in his mother's love. We thought we were the advanced species, said. We thought we had moved beyond primitive emotional attachments. We thought we were the future of the universe. He shook his head slowly, his forearms hanging at his sides. We were wrong. You are the future, all of you, with your impossible love and your willingness to die for each other. We spent 200,000 years building empires and senates and treaties, and none of it matters. None of it will last. But the way you love your children, that will echo through the stars long after all our achievements have turned to dust. James looked up from his thread. Are you okay, Mr. Alien? Felt something he had never felt before, something warm and painful in his chest. I do not know, he said honestly. I think I am learning what it means to feel small. The mother reached out and touched his arm. It was a simple gesture, the kind humans did without thinking, a gesture of comfort, of connection. "That's not a bad thing," she said. "Feeling small, it helps you understand what really matters." Looked at her hand on his arm, then at her son, then at her face. She was just an ordinary human, not a diplomat, not a leader, just a mother who loved her child with an intensity that had broken the Galactic Senate. "What really matters," he repeated. "Love," she said. "It's always love." They left the great hall together, mother and son and alien. Behind them, the floating platforms were empty. The crystal ceiling still showed the stars, but they seemed different somehow, less cold, less distant. Because somewhere out there in the vast darkness between worlds, there were humans loving their children, fighting for them, dying for them. And the galaxy would never be the same.